This is the Clean Energy Show with Brian Stockton and James Whittingham.
Hello and welcome to episode 59 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And hey, I'm James Whittingham. Welcome to our weekly discussion of the latest developments in clean energy and transportation. This week, UPS is buying up to 150 vertical takeoff and landing drones, and yes, they are electric. Tesla is testing out prefabricated supercharger installation methods in Utah, of all places. And Brian Stockton's hot take on the Saskatchewan EV road tax, which was introduced yesterday to the delight of no one. How are you, Brian?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm feeling fully vaccinated. Well, I guess I'm half vaccinated.
What?
I did. Well, I don't want to go into the details.
There was a needle involved?
It involved, exchange of money in a dirty back alley somewhere. But I managed to get it. No side effects so far, except an overwhelming urge to purchase Microsoft products.
Ah, so the chips, that's where they're going. They're not going to cars. They're going to the vaccines. I knew it. Do you feel any side effects? Because I'm starting to know a lot of people. Turns out I'm the younger kid in the group of friends that I have in a lot of cases. And you older guys are getting the vaccine. And a few of my friends and relatives have had side effects from the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is what I was hoping to get until they pulled the plug on that for people 6 months older than me and younger. Flu symptoms and stuff. I had that when I had the shingles vaccine about a year and a half ago. 2-shot vaccine, about 3 months apart, and both times I felt sick. By the time I got it the second time, I forgot that I got sick the first time, and I was like, oh yeah, it made me sick for a whole night. So you feel like you have got the flu. But I will take that, because the alternative is to start getting flu symptoms and they won't go away, and then you're in a grave, especially if you're me, because I'm barely alive, Brian. Barely. You know that.
Yeah, well, so far I feel good.
Good. That's good. It's been a couple of hours, 3 hours now or something like that.
Yeah, and of course, this is a podcast about clean energy, and we started it before the pandemic. So, we kind of inadvertently, though, have created a podcast that is something of a record of the pandemic because, we tend to talk about it a little bit every week.
Yes.
And so, here we are a year later. People are starting to get their first shots of vaccine. It's been a wild, wild year.
If it was me, I think I would feel something very poignant and significant if I got the vaccine. Do you feel that when you got as soon as it went in your arm or you walked away, did you feel like, oh shit, I made it?
Yeah, no, it was very emotional. And I was just, got quite choked up just as I was leaving, just to say thanks to the lady that gave my vaccine. And she was saying thanks to me because, it's we're all in this together. It was very emotional.
Yes. If you don't know anyone who should be getting a vaccine, can be getting a vaccine, get on their butts no matter where you live in the world, because it affects us all, whether you're on the opposite side of the planet of me or my next door neighbor, which I found out is a science denier. He came up to me the other day when I was in the yard. He thinks I'm retired too, because I act like I'm retired, but I'm not.
And you are pretty much.
Pretty much retired from being retired. But he came over and said that the siding on my house was damaged, and I knew that, of course, and from the windstorm. And I said, we've had 3 of those. And he said, yeah, it's weird. I don't really believe in climate change. I have some questions. There's some pieces of the puzzle don't go together for me, because he's so fucking smart, Brian. He's so bloody smart, my neighbor, that he's got it figured out that the scientists haven't, figured out themselves. So, yeah, climate change has given me a 127-kilometer wind for the first time in my 54 years on this planet in Regina, 52 in Regina, in the city on the prairies of Canada. And, I can't blame one event of climate change, but we've had like 3. So, yeah, my solar panels are just hanging on by a thread, man. It's just, it's crazy. My daughter cut my hair a few days ago in the backyard.
Oh, yeah.
That's how desperate I was. Now, I've had one haircut during the pandemic, and it was in June when things got a little better, and I took my chances and went in and got one. But since then, I haven't had one, and my hair is ridiculous. It makes a bad situation worse. So I let her cut it, and you know what? I felt free. I felt like a vagabond. I felt like a 1970s character from a motorcycle film. I felt like, yes, this is, I just, the hell with my hair. I just get it out of my way and I move on and smoke dope and make love.
Yeah, well, no, I haven't had a professional haircut in over a year now. My partner does it here at home every couple of months. And, I use the hair clippers that I bought at Consumers Distributing in the early 1990s. I think we've talked about this before on the podcast because the pandemic's been going on so long.
Yes.
So it's nice to get out those Consumers Distributing hair clippers.
They're still working. Kids, they made things back in the olden times much better quality than they make them today. So we've had some more warm weather, Mr. Stockton. Have you been on the e-bike? Anything to report on your e-bike situation?
No, I don't have anywhere to go. I don't.
You could have went and got your vaccine.
All this time, wondering about what kind of e-bike to get. And then I finally get one and I'm like, well, wait a minute, there's a pandemic. I don't have anywhere to go. I'm the kind of cyclist who needs somewhere to go. I'm not the kind of person that's just going to ride around on a pleasure ride. I like to go downtown or something like that, get a cup of coffee or something. So I got nowhere to go, so I haven't ridden it.
You drop some half-serious coin on it. You might take it for a loop or two. I mean, come on.
Well, it is definitely warmer today. I almost went yesterday, but it still wasn't, quite warm enough. So we'll see.
Old man Stockton won't get on e-bike. Headline. Brian, we've got all kinds of stories this week, and some of it, I would hasten to say, is interesting. You know what? There's a new Volkswagen ad for the ID.4, which is their crossover. And they've got a series of new commercials, and I have to say, I really like them. I'm going to play one for you. And it starts with the daughter sneaking into her car pre-dawn.
Shh. Before, they would have heard me taking the car.
Before, I didn't have an app that showed me when she was taking the car.
Before, the chance of an SUV handling more like a hot hatch? None.
You won't know a world before electric.
Before it can change the world, it has to change yours. The all-new, all-electric Volkswagen Id4.
Wasn't that wonderful?
That was great. Why do you like it so much?
Thank you for asking. I like it because it says why the cars are good. It doesn't say you should drive them because they're green. It says, look what you can get in this car that you can't get in yours. And I think that's a nice approach. And I also like the tagline, before we can change the world, we need to change yours. So it shows you how they're changing your world with an electric car, and you don't have to worry about changing the world. So that's my thought on that. If you guys have any thoughts, let us know, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, or on Twitter, cleanenergypod. Brian, what's on your craw this week? What are you thinking about?
There's a story that just came out today that UPS is looking to buy up to 150 vertical takeoff and landing electric aircraft. Now, when you read the story, it's maybe not so groundbreaking because they're only going to get, maybe 10 of them by 2024, and then they have an option to buy more. But this makes a lot of sense, I think, for a courier like UPS. The idea is to use it for fairly short-haul trips, and they'll be able to take off and land at UPS facilities. Like, this is an aircraft you don't need an airport for. They are, I believe, going to be piloted by a human, at least to begin with. But, it's up to a 150-mile range, and they'll be able to move packages in a smaller area, in a smaller market, really quickly. The future is coming.
I understand this has got a fairly significant cargo load, which is nothing to deny here for a vertical takeoff.
Yeah, it says 1,400-pound capacity, which is not bad. It's definitely a small aircraft, but, if you're making one or two trips a day, that's going to be plenty.
Will the UPS pilot have a little brown suit on with a little brown hat? Because I wouldn't trust them. They can't drive very well. Why would they fly very well?
Yeah, well, they got to have the brown shorts for sure.
I just, it's going to be a weird sight. If I live long enough, if I survive this damn pandemic, I know you will. So you're the future, Brian. You're the future of this podcast. You must go on without me. You've been saved.
I will carry on.
So, yeah, it's going to be a weird world. We're going to see little aircraft, fixed-wing aircraft that take off vertically, powered by electricity, which make noise but are quieter than your normal aircraft, taking off and landing wherever.
So I'm going to share a story about one of the greatest movie experiences I ever had in my life, which was at the Toronto Film Festival 25 years ago.
Brian's Movie Corner. We have to have the intro of Brian's Movie Corner. Go ahead.
Of course. It was at the Toronto Film Festival 25 years ago or so. They had an outdoor screening of Metropolis, the great Fritz Lang silent science fiction film from the 1920s. And they played it outdoors in Toronto with live music. And it was screened in Nathan Phillips Square, which is where City Hall is in Toronto, which is those two curved towers, very iconic curved towers in downtown Toronto, modern architecture built in the 60s. And we're watching Metropolis, and the fantastical futuristic cityscape that's in the film was very similar to the setting that we watched the film in, these big, tall, weird-looking towers. And in Metropolis, there were little airplanes buzzing around, like little miniature, it was all done with miniatures, and there were little miniature airplanes buzzing around this fantastical futuristic cityscape. And there we were. We were in that exact kind of setting that the film was set in. And it was a mind-blowing event. But it's only going to get more Jetsons-like in the future.
Almost augmented reality without the augmentation. Anyway, Brian, I have breaking news. This is hot off the press. VW Canada has released the pricing and availability of the ID.4. That is the ID.4 SUV, compact SUV, crossover, all-electric, with a manufacturer's suggested retail price of $44,995 for the rear-wheel drive and about $50,000 for the all-wheel drive. Knock $5,000 off that. And really, it's not that different than a normal vehicle of that size in that segment, especially when you consider the sort of luxuriousness and technology that is coming with these vehicles. So they both qualify for the federal and provincial rebates. I wish we have the opposite of provincial rebates here. They've gone to the other direction.
We'll get to that in a second.
82 kilowatt versions, 400 kilometers range, similar to your car, at least on paper. And so BC, Quebec, late summer, Ontario follows, and where we are, God knows when. But, I'm seriously thinking about that one. 100 kilometers and 10 minutes of charging on the highway. It's not my ideal car, but it's getting closer to a price point when you factor in the savings of gas, especially. And yes, I will say it, the carbon tax in Canada is changing the equation. It's slow, but gas was up to 129 cents, 128 cents, 128, $1.28, let's call it, a liter, which is more than it has been, especially during the pandemic. And that factors into, if gas prices are going to be X as a minimum, and then you work it out on a napkin, then 5 years of ownership or whatever you want to own it for, then it starts to pay for itself, the extra money, if there is any extra money involved. Yeah,
that's really interesting. The price wars are heating up, and those are comparable to the Hyundai Kia prices. Maybe they'll drop theirs a little bit. It's looking great.
Now, the ID.4 is not a perfect car at this point, but it is a fairly spacious one, wouldn't you say? And the all-wheel drive will be a popular variant in a lot of places in the country that get snow.
Yeah, and I know you're a fan of the Ford Mustang Mach-E, and apparently there's been a couple of those delivered here in Saskatchewan,
right?
So they do exist. I haven't seen one, but there's been postings on social media that they do exist here. I think it's a little bit more money than the Volkswagen, but things are happening.
Well, Brian, this brings us to a new edition of What Do You Think? I wanted to ask you what you think about the op-ed that Fred Lambert did on Electric that said that the Tesla's toxic superfans are giving the community a bad name as stories go into mainstream newspapers about just nasty things that Tesla superfans are doing. This involves a Ford Mach-E. Somebody traded in their Tesla and decided to drive a Ford Mach-E. And to my surprise, and I think yours probably will be as well, they went crazy on this person for some reason. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the nature of social media, for one thing. It's the nature of Twitter. I mean, I think it's always going to be toxic. But yeah, you have such a large vocal fan base now of, Tesla bulls that have basically defeated all the critics at this point. Tesla has surpassed all expectations. Their Q1 delivery figures were just announced, which we should touch on briefly because it was an absolute record blowout quarter for Tesla. The first quarter of the year is always the weakest for pretty much any car manufacturer. And they actually beat their Q4 numbers from the previous quarter by a few percent, which, this is unheard of, that they would beat their all-time, not just for this quarter, an all-time delivery record for the first quarter of the year. So the Tesla bulls are all getting pretty high on their own supply. They're all pretty full of themselves. And they're being nasty on Twitter. And I, if there's a justification for it, it's very true that the legacy automakers have been dragging their heels and really being, they're kind of like the old tobacco companies. It's very hard to say anything nice about the old tobacco companies. And, the car companies haven't been that much different. They've all had some sense of the pollution that they're causing and have done very little. So the anger comes from what you might call a legitimate place. But, I'm a nice guy. I think we should all be nice to each other.
But that's what Elon wants. He wants other companies to come forward, and he has pressured them to do that. And Ford made a compelling vehicle. Yeah, Ford sucks. I don't like Ford. Ford is down there with Chevy with me. I dislike Ford as a brand for quality and BS. But they made a compelling EV, and that's what we really need them to do. And they're going to come out with a F-150, and hopefully they'll knock that one out of the park as well. And another thing about the Tesla Quarter is that they were changing over the manufacturing of the S and X to a new sort of a new refreshed model, which they don't like to use that term. But that also, so production was actually stopped for them. I may mention there's a pandemic of sorts going on, which was peaking in January in North America. So they did very well. And in a lot of other places, too, it was peaking. So a second wave, anyway.
Even though they made no Model S or Model X cars in the quarter, and then still a record delivery number. And I'm not a huge fan of Ford either, but I do, of the American auto brands, they are the one I like the most. I know you had a bad experience with a Ford Aerostar, I think, was it?
And Windstar, whatever.
Windstar,
minivan.
And certainly there's, lots of Ford lemons out there, but I do prefer them to the other American brands, and they are the only other car company other than Tesla in America that's never gone bankrupt. And GM are the ones that, made a nice little electric car and then crushed it. So GM are really the ones that we should have more issues with, or Volkswagen and the Dieselgate.
Yes, people stop doxing people, stop doing nasty things. It's crazy. It's almost cultish how Tesla superfans get sometimes, and I hope that they don't continue to do that, because like Fred says, it does give the whole movement a bad name. More in What Do You Think? I want to ask you about, did you see the Cyberlander is trying to create the ultimate camper for the Cybertruck? It has solar panels that are on top. The little thing pops up and there's a ladder. It's made by a third party. Did you see that?
Yeah, it's a quick little article. It's a concept at this point, but I think they're taking pre-orders or something maybe. But I think it just shows you what's going to be possible with electric vehicles and outfitting them for camping. The Cybertruck is going to be great for that. The Rivian's great for that. Keep in mind that you can't do that safely in any kind of gas or diesel vehicle, because if you ever want to turn the engine on, you could end up asphyxiating yourself. But E.V.s, a Cybertruck with a camping attachment on the back, I mean, that's going to be absolutely brilliant. People are going to love that.
So staying with Tesla for a little while longer, Tesla is introducing a 50% supercharging discount at night in California to help with capacity. So the idea is to encourage people, to incentivize them to charge at off-peak times in order to deal with capacity problems. Do you think that's going to work?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of necessary and inevitable. You're going to have to tweak the system to make it work. And of course, there were rumors a couple of weeks ago that Tesla might be offering up their supercharging network to other automakers, that they would maybe sell an adapter so that you can still use the supercharger network, even if you don't have a Tesla. So, and there was another story from Electrek today. They're going to build a supercharger in California now with 100 stalls. So, they're deploying this network as fast as they possibly can. But of course, they're going to sell maybe almost 1 million cars this year. So, the network's going to need lots of upgrading, especially if they open it up to third parties. And so, yeah, there's going to be a lot of these kind of tweaks to the system to get the most use out of it in a 24-hour period.
They don't talk about that aspect of their business. They don't talk about very much. Basically, what we learn is from Elon and from a few people leaking things to the press. But I think that they're building up relationships. This is just my hunch, that they're building up relationships based on what went down here in Saskatchewan. They built up a relationship with a mall retailer that had places across the country. I think they're building relationships in advance, and then they'll knock on those doors when they need to and negotiate when they need to, and just surveying and getting an idea of where property is and where demand is necessary, and learning from data fed back from the car as well as social media and stuff like that. So that's interesting to me, because it takes at least a month to get one set up and running, and that's not including getting it connected to the grid and the permitting and stuff like that. So that's my thought on that.
And of course, they have that new factory in China now where they're cranking out more of these. They've vastly increased their capacity for making them. And then if you want to move on to that story about the prefab superchargers.
Yeah. Well, I do, but I can't, because it's in a different segment. I can't go outside this segment and into another segment, Brian. It's all color coded in front of me. I can't do that. But I am going to switch gears here. Yeah, you're vaccinated. You've got Bill Gates running inside you. I know what it's like. I used Windows for years and years. I want to switch gears. The median wage for solar workers in the United States is $24.48 an hour, compared to $30.33 an hour for those employed in the natural gas industry, which is about a $12,000 a year wage gap. Do you think, I was wondering what you thought about that, because is it a problem? Is that going to prevent people from going from oil into green jobs, green energy, from one carbon intense to carbon free?
Well, if jobs are disappearing in one sector and then appearing in another sector, they're not going to have too much choice. But I will also say that oil and gas jobs are typically a lot more dangerous. Yeah. In fact, I know someone who was killed on an oil rig here in our province a few years ago. So, it makes sense maybe that it's a bit higher wage, but I don't know, that might even out in time. It's also a younger industry, so maybe once it matures, the wages will go up.
Okay, now we're done. What do you think?
Finally.
So now we're outside that. Now we're somewhere else. I'm gonna go quickly to feedback, because John on Twitter says that we're his favorite podcast. You know what I say to that? I say, thank you, John. You know what I also say? I can't take the pressure. That's a lot of pressure. I feel like we have to show up every week now.
Now we have to tailor our content just for John.
I don't want to go on Twitter in a month or two from now and see that XYZ is my favorite podcast. I want to stay on top with John.
Oh, man.
And I feel pressure. I didn't felt pressure before this podcast. We've been doing this for a year. Now we've got standards. So coming up later in the show is the lightning round, where we'll clean up the headlines and go through with Brian all the other things that we've missed. Do you have anything else this week, Brian?
I did want to talk briefly about Starship SN11. There was another test flight that we neglected to talk about last week. And I just enjoy playing clips from, these Starship launches.
There's the clip.
That was the clip. It blew up. Okay, we can move on now.
Why did it blow up, Brian? Why did it blow up?
There was some sort of a leak in one of the engines, so they had video of, some sort of a little fire developing in one of the engines, and it seems like it exploded before it hit the ground, which was kind of fun for a change. But they did it during fog, so nobody could see anything. All the cameras were just all foggy.
If it's going to blow up a starship, do it on a clear day when we get good footage. Come on, people. It's
exactly.
basic starship etiquette. Okay, GM is planning to build the Chevrolet Silverado electric pickup. These are the last of the pickup brands going electric is Chevrolet with the Silverado. We already got one from Ford. We've got a GM product from the Hummer. We've got Rivian, and we've got... I think even Ram is doing one too. Basically everyone. Except for Toyota and Honda. I like to laugh. Screw you, you horrible anti-EV people. So we're talking 640 kilometers of range. That's 400 miles. They have not announced when it's coming. The important thing is, it's coming. And that's everybody now. So yeah. Cheers for the EV revolution. Cheers for where we live, where everyone drives a pickup or you're not a man. And they claim it'll feature innovations that you can't even imagine. And I say to that, phooey. Brian and I can imagine a lot of things.
I have a pretty good imagination. I don't know.
He's been awarded for his imagination. He's got things on his wall.
Totally.
First place imagination. So yeah. I don't know about that. Also, Brian, this is kind of depressing, but EV chargers are coming to South Dakota. Now, I remind you that South Dakota let the virus run free because it was a fake thing. And even though half the population died, which is all 3,000 of them, and the governor was a big supporter of Trump and did whatever Trump wanted. I can't remember the name, and it's a good thing because I do want to mention it. But they want to make more money available for the state, more money than they already have, to underwrite more fast charging stations along the I-90, which runs east to west, and the I-29, which runs north to south. So they approved 7 grants for charging stations in December, and they're going to do more. 5% of the money from the VW emission scandals is going to go to those charging stations, and it's going to boost it by 15%. So even South Dakota is doing things pro-EV, probably because they want EVs to drive through their state, because you and I have looked at it, and there's some holes down there if we're going to drive down there with our EVs. Yeah, we're not going to go through your stupid state unless you have EV chargers. But not Saskatchewan. No money from Saskatchewan whatsoever, where we live.
Yes, I'm looking forward to getting back down to Fargo, North Dakota soon. There's been enough chargers opening that I think you might be able to get there via Winnipeg. It's maybe still not fully there, but yeah, this of course brings us to our local EV issue.
Yes. Do you want to talk about that? Because, we had our film industry killed on budget day. 9 years ago? Something like that. And now we have the EVs kicked in the balls.
We've all got a bit of PTSD from Budget Day here in Saskatchewan, those of us in the film industry. And yeah, I always have mixed feelings talking about local issues like this because it's an extremely local issue. And of course, podcasting is a global medium, so bear with us while we whine and complain about our local government. I guess the good news is that we are a province of only 1 million people. So, whatever happens here, let's face it, is not all that important. But, it's sort of like, I don't know, you call this segment Dispatches from the Petro State, because that's kind of where we're at right now. Yeah, so Budget Day came out and they just introduced a $150 yearly tax for electric vehicles in our province. And I will add, first of all, that there are only apparently 403 electric vehicles in the province. So this is a $60,000 budget item. It's not even worth anybody's time for the effort that it took to put this into the budget, let alone the effort and time and money it's going to take to collect it. Like, this is going to be a negative budget item for a couple of years.
Money, but they're so bitter They're so bloody bitter about the carbon tax, the federal carbon tax, that they lost to the Supreme Court of Canada. See our last week's episode. And that they just want to do petty little, stupid little things like this. They don't care if they lose money. They want to stick it to the people who don't vote for them. Stick it to those, and the stupid thing is we're getting into a place with EVs where not everybody who drives an EV is a lefty. We've got tech geeks on the left and right and in the middle who are buying EVs. Now people are looking for technology, not to save the planet necessarily. It's broadening. Everyone, of course, is going to continue.
And I'm actually not even against the tax. It's just the fact that they brought it in so hilariously quick. California has a very similar tax, but they waited until there was 700,000 electric vehicles on the road before they implemented it because, they wanted to encourage the adoption. They didn't want to stifle the adoption. So a move like this is clearly meant to stifle adoption. It's kind of the opposite of virtue signaling. This is my hot take for this, James. Mm-hmm. So you're all familiar with the term virtue signaling, which has come into vogue in the last couple of years, and it's typically aimed at people on the left or, tree huggers or environmentalists. Oh, you're just driving that electric car because you're virtue signaling. You just want to look like you're a good person. It doesn't actually do anything. You're virtue signaling. So I don't know. This sort of struck me as the opposite of virtue signaling. So I decided to do a Google search. What is the opposite of virtue signaling? And so I found a nice article here on Quora by Joe Andros. So thanks, Joe, for writing this little article. And he was kind of wondering the same thing. What is the opposite of virtue signaling? And he sort of was throwing around a few ideas, complacency signal or apathy signal. But really the one that he landed on and the one that I like is called vicious signaling. So this is what the opposite of virtue signaling is. And vicious signaling is an attempt to counter and discourage all calls to make things better, typically by undermining the commitment or sincerity of those making the call or their standing to make the call.
Well, to that I say to the government of Saskatchewan, good luck, sweetheart. It's not going to work. You're done. The oil's done. Your buddies are done. All your our premier was speaking at an energy conference today. When he says energy, they mean oil. Giving information about vaccinating oil workers. Seriously.
Was he really
They're
talking
thinking
about
of
that?
breaking the age restriction and giving vaccines to oil workers because those are the people at risk, not the grocery store workers, not the frontline health cares, the police, the EMTs, teachers. It's the oil workers. I mean, don't move to Saskatchewan. Don't do business with Saskatchewan. We are a shithole province. We don't, Brian and I are the only smart people here. Everyone else left. Everyone with the room temperature IQ or higher, they moved. Well, there's a couple people, but they're stuck here. Glue has stuck them literally here, and they cannot leave. That's what else you got to say about this?
Well, I'm just hoping maybe we can help popularize this term vicious signaling because there's just no other word for it. In the face of nothing encouraging and in fact further subsidies for oil and gas to put a tax like this, it's nothing but vicious signaling.
It's not going to change anything. It is just hilarious when there's 400 cars instead of 700,000. When you get to 700,000, it makes a difference, right? It makes a difference because you're losing road tax money. But it's going to cost them more to collect a piddly 16,000 than it will be to get it, just so they can be dicks.
At least wait till there's 2,000 EVs on the road, and then you won't lose money collecting the fee.
Oh, but Brian, there will never be 2,000 EVs. You see, when I went on the radio a year ago, December, it was 185. So, yeah, and I said, yeah, that's not a lot of number, but when they double, and they keep doubling, things get serious fast. So, good luck. And everywhere else in the world, they probably have no idea what's going on in Europe and the UK and China and India. Probably have no idea or probably don't want to know. But gas is going bye-bye, and EVs and electrified transportation, even your UPS-friendly UPS driver will now be flying a reckless plane for your house.
No, and I have another story. IKEA in New York City plans to be fully electric with their delivery trucks by May 2021. Like, we often talk about these stories of these commitments by a certain date, but I wanted to mention that one just because their date is May 2021, which is
how many
next
years
month.
from now is that? Is that 4 years, 5 years?
That is 1 month from now.
1 month from now. There you go. 1 month. IKEA. Probably the first place to have electric chargers in Canada. We don't have an IKEA here, but I remember going to see them. It was EV charger tourism. I would go and see.
Yeah.
I remember going to see the hybrid parking spot in the Mountain Equipment Co-op parking lot about 10 years ago, thinking, wow, how progressive is that?
Yeah, and IKEA is working on their carbon footprint. They've realized that they do have a lot of products that are kind of disposable and not that great for the environment. So let's hope that they stay on this kick and make their place a little bit more environmentally friendly.
Getting back to the EV tax for a second, 10 years ago, exactly 10 years ago, the same government, the same ruling party with the same Public Insurance Bureau actually gave a 20% discount to people with fuel-efficient cars. And I got to take advantage of that, Brian, for exactly 1 month after I bought my first hybrid. And then they quietly erased it in the budget. So you see, I got screwed in that budget, too. Yeah, 20%. 20% off of insurance is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, it's a nice incentive. But boy, they've become... shortly after that, they shut down the film industry and they did all these petty partisan things. So, yeah, good luck with running the province into the future with that attitude.
Yeah, and of course, you and I got in on the solar program before they killed that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. Anyway, let's get, did you see the Tesla SuperCharger prefabricated version where they're already mounted in a slab of cement and transported on a truck and hooked up very quickly? What do you think of those things?
Yeah, well, part of the fun of watching Tesla and watching SpaceX or any of these Elon Musk companies is that he's always prioritized speed. Like, doing everything quicker is like super important to him. And if you think about it, it makes business sense too. Like, the faster you can do things, it does result in a lot more blown up rockets than maybe another company might have. But, when you prioritize speed over everything, you come up with prefabricated supercharger stations. So they're pre-installing these on a concrete slab, and then you just take them to the site and basically drop them in with a crane, it looks like. So they're just trying to accelerate everything, and it's necessary because, with those spectacular delivery numbers they had for the first quarter, they're on track for around 1 million cars this year, and all those cars are going to need more and more charging stations. They're going to, almost double the fleet in 1 year.
And can you imagine if they came up with a $25,000 Tesla and started mass producing those out of 2 or 3 North American factories all at the same time? How many superchargers they would have to whip up? So I think they have to be ready for that day. And I think they will be.
No, and presumably they've done the math on that, and they know, what targets they're shooting for and how many vehicles will be in the market. So, presumably they're working that out.
Getting back to SpaceX for a second, we've talked about Starlink before, and I guess the CEO, Gwynne Shotwell of Starlink, was talking about the price dropping significantly on those terminals that are very expensive. And she says they've dropped from an initial $3,000 to they're now half that at $1,500, which is still costs more than you actually pay for it, I believe. So you're still kind of
at $1,500. They're still losing $1,000 on every one.
So, but she says that the new terminal will be $200 less than the version 1 when they have the version 2 come out. And they expect that price to be in a few $100 range within 1 to 2 years. So beta trials are continuing on that, and we had the opportunity to join that. Anything new on your thoughts on Starlink? It seems to be going well, and speeds and reliability seems to be improving with every burst of satellites they shoot up there. How many?
Yeah,
40 at a time or something?
60 at a time, 60. And there was another 60 launched today. They've had something like 8 launches already, so they're actually very close now to worldwide coverage. And this gets back to the speed that I was talking about. Like the thing that I was wondering today as I watched that 60 more satellites go up, it's like, oh, wait a minute. How much are these costing, or how difficult are these satellites to make? Because they're just making those at an incredible rate too. Like just to be able to put 60 more satellites up every couple of weeks, they've got some factory somewhere that is going, at some kind of incredible pace to get all this done.
Yeah, and they have to test them, and I guess you said some of them are duds, or some of them don't reach the proper orbit and fall back to Earth, which was news to me.
There's already a handful of them that have been decommissioned or have maybe even already burned up. So they don't have a 100% success rate. But if you put up 60 of them, even if only 58 of them work, that's fine.
The Clean Energy Show Lightning Round. Brian, how are you feeling this week? Your vaccine is still okay, right? I have to check in health-wise before we start the lightning round. Make sure you're doing all right.
Popcorn peanut butter lamp.
Very good. It sounds good to me. Texas wind power smashes records in March. Just throwing it out there for Republican listeners. That's all. Any comment on that?
No comment.
Tesla's building a new world's largest supercharger station with 100 stalls, but they're also going to build that diner, that 50-style diner in Santa Monica, I believe. Which went away and now is back again, which I'm excited about. I predict, Brian, that it will be a Graceland for Tesla fanboys. Everybody will go there. That'll be the factory. If you can get into the factory, good. But if not, just go to there. Yeah,
we talked about this a few weeks ago, and you're disappointed because the plans seem to have disappeared. But the plans have resurfaced. It seems like it's going to happen. Of course, nothing's been started yet. So, but yeah, I would definitely plan to go there if this pandemic ever ends.
A message for Canadian petrol provincial governments. Pure combustion vehicle sales fall below 10% in Norway in March for the first time. That is to say, out of all the new vehicles purchased, only 10% were purely gasoline or diesel, which is small because they're going to all electric in less than 4 years, 2025. They're going to make it. They're going to make it, Brian.
And we'll be last.
Those people, they get a discount on their tolls, and they get to use the lanes, the right lanes for the congestion, and they have different incentives, and parking and stuff like that. Whereas we're charging money here for electric vehicles.
And I do think that they have started to talk about rolling back some of these. And, now that adoption is so high, they don't need those incentives anymore. And once everybody's driven an electric car, they realize they're better anyway. So, you can roll back these incentives. You don't even need incentives. You just please don't have disincentives.
Say you're a little old lady who goes to church once a week. Your church is a block and a half away. You're driving your electric car. You still have to pay that road tax like you drive like an average person. They don't know how much you drive. It's not fair.
Yeah, that's the main problem with this. It's a regressive tax because it's a flat fee depending on if you drive 100,000 kilometers or if you drive 100 kilometers. It's that part of it is absolutely not fair.
So all they needed to do was divide 16,000 between everyone else who, and just, that's what they should be doing. They should be adding taxes. You can say, well, there shouldn't be we shouldn't be throwing money at EVs. Well, then you should be pricing combustion vehicles for the damage that they do and putting a tax on them. And they are putting a carbon tax on the gas, but not on the vehicle themselves. So why aren't those vehicles getting charged extra for not being EVs? That's what I ask. That's what it should be. Thank you. You have nothing to say to that?
No.
Okay. He's caught cross-eyed. The vaccine is kicking in. The vaccine is kicking in on Brian. The Nissan Leaf is the number one selling EV in Ireland. And to you, Brian Stockton, I ask why. What is it about Ireland? Any whimsical thoughts?
They must have a limited supply of Teslas there.
Okay. Tesla says cabin camera is not activated in China. And Elon is saying that if our cameras were spying on China, we'd be kicked out. We're not going to do anything like that, he assures. Is the Chinese being paranoid? What do you say to the chairman of China right now who's listening?
Yeah, well, this is a story that started coming out a couple of weeks ago that there was going to be concerns really about any product coming into the country with all those cameras on them, which is, a Tesla car and 8 cameras potentially seeing sensitive information. So they eventually did make some kind of a blanket barring of Teslas from military installations or something like that. And, that kind of makes sense. A vehicle can go in there. But with all these electronic devices and, phones are very much the same thing. In some ways, you just have to kind of trust the company. I know that's difficult to do. So, Tesla says the interior cameras are not turned on yet in China. Maybe someday they will be. And, so they've made promises about the privacy. Apple has been making a lot of promises about privacy. We just have to hope that they're sincere and hope that they don't get hacked, because everybody's vulnerable to a hack. So, even if you say, oh, we're not stealing any data, we're not turning these cameras on, there's always a danger. I mean, there was another big leak of 500,000 Facebook users, names and data information was all just leaked. So, it's a strange privacy nightmare we have to navigate these days.
Brian, what is anyone going to do with video of me driving down the road on my face?
Yeah, and you can cameras on public roads shouldn't be any kind of an issue. And I don't know what the laws are in China, but here in Canada, if you're on a public road, a public street, you're allowed to photograph whatever you want. And that's typically where cars are. They're just on public spaces, public roads. So that's things that everybody can see and everybody can access. So that's not really the problem. It's more, something else further could be done.
The only thing that you could gain from looking at a close-up of my face driving is how much I grimace and offload flatulence, which will tell you something about my digestive health, which, by the way, is improving. If you've been listening to the podcast, is improving.
Well, that's good. But of course, this show is banned in China ever since our film played at the Beijing Film Festival.
Oh, yeah. We're banned in China, but we have somebody outside in a white van who follows us everywhere. NIO, speaking of China, is celebrating the production of their 100,000th electric car, which averaged, by the way, about $65,000 U.S. So they made 100,000 cars, NIO has, finally.
Yeah, that's great. They're one of the bigger players in China for EVs. So, it seems like they've got a good chance of succeeding.
And Biden is going to spend more on EV charging than on roads and bridges, and some say that's a problem. Your thoughts?
Well, as we just discussed, I mean, there's going to be an explosion of EVs, so you're going to need an explosion of charging infrastructure. But it's always going to be a question of what's the right amount, and most EV charging is done at home, so you don't need necessarily the full-blown infrastructure that you have for, say, gas stations. But it's all part of the potential stimulus spending that's coming, including there's now rumors of a $10,000 EV tax credit up from the $7,500, I'm not sure, again, if that's really the best way to go. Pricing pollution is probably a better strategy, but, we've said that before.
Well, sticking with China and ending the show on China is there are 300 million e-bikes on China's roads, and that number is predicted to surge on the back of rising popularity and policy initiatives. And what we're selling isn't just transportation, says a guy in China. It's a transportation tool. It's a platform allowing people to have better lives. So if you walk around the streets of Beijing, it's hard to ignore the fact that more and more young people are using e-bikes, and they're actually pretty cool. Lost your bike in a jungle of other two-wheelers? You can locate it using an app on your mobile phone. So you know how there's, it seems like there's 100 scooters lined up, piled together outside a store or something. You can find it in that mumble jumble with your app. And can't find your friend's apartment? The GPS built into your e-bike can guide you. And cell phone running out of power, charge it using your e-bike's battery, which I can do. And you can even connect your bike to a mini projector and use it for residual power to watch a movie while relaxing outdoors with your buddies. E-bikes are wonderful. We're going to have some more e-bike reviews coming up on our YouTube channel. Check that out. Thanks, everyone, for listening this week. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Clean Energy Show. See you then.
Yeah, see you next week.